In the not-too-distant future, wars will no longer exist, but there will be Rollerball. Imagine a world without nations.
A few of us making decisions on a global basis.
Controlled by corporations.
No sickness, no needs, and many luxuries.
A society that has abolished love and hate, aggression and individuality, and replaced them with the most fantastic entertainment of all time. Televised to 2 billion hypnotized viewers. It is more than a game. It is Rollerball. James Caan, John Houseman, Rollerball. Rated R.
Welcome back, everybody, to a brand new episode of ReconCinemation. I'm John Diner.
I'm David Munchak.
I'm Brent Hutchins.
And this is the podcast that takes a look back at some of our favorite films from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And guys, we had to do an emergency rush into the recording studio, and we had some late breaking news that as of just a couple of days ago when we record this, we lost a number of people, the first of which is the great James Caan. So
it's a big one. Big loss.
It's a big loss, and we decided to kind of switch around our schedule and shift a few things, and we're going to take a look at James Caan's career, and specifically we're going to talk about 1975's Rollerball. But also in between when he passed and when we got into the booth here, we lost another actor who's a big, I think some of us are big fans of, which was Tony Sirico, one of the stars of The Sopranos and, you know, The Goodfellas and Copland, and he's in just a ton of movies, but big fans here. So we just want to take a minute here at the top just to kind of talk about him, and then we'll get into James Caan.
Yeah, Polly Walnuts, man.
Polly Walnuts. I mean, one of the most messed up but fun characters from The Sopranos. Yeah. That
absolutely
so many memorable lines and faces and expressions, and Tony was a quite a character also. If anybody listens to the Talking Sopranos podcast that's hosted by Michael Imperioli and Steve Sharippa, they talk a lot about Tony, the human, you know, and what his personality was like. And he was a character, and he started out as like a real, you know, he was a gangster in his youth. And personally, his friends knew him as Junior. You couldn't call him Junior because of Junior Soprano on the show, but that's some of them as kids, like when they were in clubs in the New York area, like they knew Tony Sirico because he was there doing his kind of gangster thing and making pickups and, you know, like getting into fights. And it's funny that, you know, 25 years later down the road, they kind of all reunite as actors. And it was an interesting career that he had. But
yeah, I mean, we just talked about him in our Goodfellas.
I know.
Episode. You know?
Yeah.
Wow. So Tony Stacks. So yeah, it's sad to see his life come to an end, but he had an awesome career, a lot of awesome projects that he was part of. So
yeah. Of course, you know, The Sopranos is the number one, and that did a lot for the later part of his life. And you know, it was good that he could kind of wind down having a successful career, and such a memorable character. There's so many great moments with him on that show, the Pine Barrens episode, and the whole relationship between Paulie and Christopher, and then Paulie and Tony as it goes on. Tony Sirico will definitely be missed, but we can always pop in episodes. So, you know, Polly Walnuts is still with us. So
forever.
He lives on.
Okay.
It's on my list of things to rewatch. It's very high on my list is rewatching Sopranos so that I can finally watch the final season.
Yeah.
Final half season.
We've talked about this. This is
several times, I know.
Sopranos is my number one show of all time. I don't see anything ever topping it. I think there's so much value in that show creatively and what it did and how it changed television, but how it holds up, especially the further into it you get. The first season's a little dated, maybe more than a little dated, but as you get into 2 and beyond that, thematically, it's just the setting is the mafia, but that's not really what the show's about. There's so much more philosophically going on with those characters, and always recommend a rewatch or a first time watch if you haven't seen it.
It's amazing. That's your number one show. Mine is Punky Brewster. So
Wow.
They go hand in hand.
Totally polar opposites, but hey, you know what? That's what's so great about this show. We can have totally polar opposite opinions and still come together and talk about movies.
This is true. We're going to talk about how much you guys love Rollerball. We're going to get to it soon.
Let's go.
Do you?
Why wait?
Is it a 10 out of 10 or is it a 12 out of 10?
I've got thoughts.
All right. Well, as we mentioned, and the reason we're here is we're talking about James Caan as well, who I don't know if I would go so far as to say he's an iconic actor, but he was a major player for a really, really long time. He stayed relevant in every decade. Even if he kind of ducked out for a little while, he'd come back with something huge. And I feel like he's always, ever since I started watching movies, like he's always had a presence and, had movies that stuck with me or performances that stuck with me over the years. And what about you guys? When's the first time James Caan kind of hit your radar? David, what about you?
I got to think about what would be the first.
I mean, as a kid, when we were kids coming up, probably around that time,
yeah.
I'm guessing Misery maybe was the first one where, unless you had seen The Godfather.
I hadn't seen The Godfather by that point. So, yeah, I mean,
maybe Honeymoon in Vegas.
Shit. No, man. It's like I need to see him twice, right? Like, when's the first thing I seen him in, and then what did I see him in later?
Yeah.
Misery. I guess I wouldn't have connected him with Dick Tracy.
Dick Tracy. Yeah. Well, it's like a Godfather reunion there between him and Pacino and Dick Tracy. He's only in, I think, 1 or 2 scenes, but
yeah, that's the thing. I barely remember. And then, and then he kept showing up and stuff. I think The Way of the Gun, though, that was one of my favorite movies of the 2000s.
Yeah, Way of the Gun is a fantastic and forgotten movie. One we should cover on the show.
I used to own it. It was so good. Like, of all the movies. So
yeah,
that's a good time. So that's kind of like probably where he really stood out for me when I started paying attention to things.
Yeah. Brent, what about you? When did James Caan enter your mind space?
I was definitely aware of him from kind of some of the movies that you were already talking about. Godfather, even though I don't remember exactly when I saw Godfather. It didn't have quite as impact on me as it did, I think, for you, John, that movie in particular. But I knew about Sonny Corleone, and I knew, I understood that character. It was pretty iconic just during the time of my youth. And so there was that for sure. And then I think Misery is a good one. Alien Nation was one that I loved as a kid. That definitely was one that introduced me to him. I actually just rewatched that last night.
Oh, really?
And man, damn, I used to love that movie. I watched it quite a bit. I think the one that really, Honeymoon in Vegas is another one that he sticks out in for me from my youth. But The Program is one that I probably watched 75, 100 times before I got to college, and then in college probably watched it another 100 times. Me and my buddy Ryland, who we've talked about on the show sometimes, definitely those movies all were really big, prominent kind of parts of movies from my childhood growing up. So those are the ones that really kind of stick out to me. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, you mentioned earlier saying I don't know that we could call him really an iconic. I think we can. I mean, Sonny Corleone is like one of those characters that is, will live on forever from the Godfather saga. And so it's like I think that James Caan and his body of work, like he will not be, I mean, he's just an incredible actor who has an incredible resume.
Yeah.
And I don't know what exactly constitute being able to call an actor an icon, but I would say that he's definitely in that kind of echelon. So
yeah, I mean, he had such a wide variety of work too, from The Godfather to Honeymoon in Vegas to Elf to Way of the Gun to just all over the place, and solid performances in all of them. I think he had done like 130 movies, 100 somewhere around there. Just so many, and starting, I mean, going way back to the beginning of his career when he started with John Wayne in El Dorado in 1966. So you forget that he goes that far back.
Yeah.
That,
I mean, he was in old Hitchcock episodes, like the Hitchcock Presents TV show. Like he's been a ton, and like, I mean, Elf, like, some of his more recent stuff, although Elf is 20 years ago now, but it's,
we don't put all those words together about Elf.
Yeah.
That it's 20 years ago.
It's crazy to think about, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, huge loss. I mean, I know he hadn't been doing anything for a long time, his health, or for a little while at least, I don't think, other than
the last few years he'd been fairly quiet.
Kind of quiet. Yeah, I guess he's got a few things that are, I mean, still coming. So
yeah, there's one or two.
We'll see a couple more things, but he was definitely in the twilight stages of his life, and not doing a whole bunch, not nearly as much as he did when he was younger. So, but
he wasn't in the movie Twilight. Was not in that.
Yeah, let's not confuse.
He almost was. He could have been in the one with Paul Newman and Gene Hackman. Could have fit in that Twilight. But,
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but James Caan was a huge actor for me as a kid growing up. I connected in the deepest way with The Godfather when I was 9 in 1989 or thereabouts. The first time I saw it, and I loved Sonny. Like, I was in love with Sonny Corleone. I thought he was the coolest guy. I just wanted to be like Sonny. I remember trying to like get my shoulders to stay in the same position, because James Caan had that like really kind of square shoulders that you see so much of in The Godfather, and I was like, oh, I can get my posture to be like that.
Wow.
I loved it, and around the same time, I think Gardens of Stone had just come out, and I'd only seen like clips of that, but there was something about James Caan's persona that I just thought was so cool as a kid, especially. Like, he just had so much confidence, and he's cocky and it just had such a good energy about him, and Alien Nation like had come out right around the same time. So it's kind of all these convergence of a little bit older James Caan, and then present James Caan, and then like the next year was Honeymoon in Vegas and Misery, and kind of like really one thing after another, where he's just throwing out these really good and fun kind of performances. I haven't seen Honeymoon in Vegas in forever, but I remember really like having a good time with it. The Program, which you mentioned, that was a huge movie. All my friends and a lot of guys in our age group love The Program, and we were in maybe middle school or early high school, and that was a big movie at the time, like a cult movie. It wasn't like a big hit movie, but one that was like we'd rent it and watch it over and over and over.
I just remember all of us, like Naggett and Ryland, all of us, like, and we quote lines like walking up and down. I can already in my head hear Nagget saying starting line, place at the table, like constantly just ringing in my ears.
And then as I got into college and started exploring more of 70s film is when I got into some of his earlier stuff. The Gambler, Rollerball, Thief, which we covered here on the show about almost 2 years ago. And Thief is an amazing film, and James Caan's performance is stellar in that. And it's Michael Mann's first real movie. And you can hear us talk in a lot of detail on it in the archives at www.ReconCinemation.com. But James Caan, by the late 70s, early 80s, his star had kind of dwindled down a little bit after the height of The Godfather and being nominated for an Oscar, and his films weren't doing as well. That movie comes out, completely re-legitimizes him, and just a fantastic character that he fit perfectly for, because he's smart and cool and not hot-headed in that, like Sonny Corleone. His character in Thief is much more calculating and plans out every move. Very much a core Michael Mann character. And then, as his career went on, it's Way of the Gun was a great movie. I think I saw it about a year after it came out, and was one of it's I think written and directed by Christopher McQuarrie. So it's got a little bit of the twists and turns, that were so popular after The Usual Suspects, but great cast. And he's just awesome as this old school gangster in a members only jacket that I also happen to sport one of those often, but who's like, there's these big shootouts happening, and James Caan character is just kind of floating in the background and like picking people off and silently kind of moving through. And it's a great movie, one really worth watching. And then, we mentioned Elf, which is one of the greatest holiday films of all time. It's probably maybe the last classic that has been released in our lifetime. I mean, there's other Christmas movies, but that's Elf to me is like a classic. It just goes along with It's a Wonderful Life and Home Alone.
Watch it every year now.
Yeah.
It's
and that one doesn't age to me.
No.
But
another movie that we didn't mention, I'm just going to jump in that we should, because it started a young Wes Anderson's career, is Bottle Rocket.
Huge.
Which I'm pretty obviously it's been a long time since I've thought about that movie too much, but James Caan's involvement in that movie is what kind of helped get Wes Anderson the clout to make that movie in the first place. It was a short that he had seen, and he liked it so much that he wanted to be a part of the feature. And so, that obviously was a springboard for Wes Anderson to go on and make Rushmore, and then it's all history from there. But that's pretty cool.
Wes Anderson honestly owes a lot of his career to James Caan.
Sure.
I remember when Bottle Rocket, you're correct, everything you just said. Bottle Rocket had just come out, or was about to come out. And I remember it was the 1996 MTV Movie Awards. And James Caan came out to kind of present the trailer for Bottle Rocket and announced, like, we've discovered this great young filmmaker that is going to be a big deal. And it was my privilege to have worked with him and helped him. And I remember James Caan plugging Wes Anderson was the reason I saw the movie.
Yeah.
If he's vouching for him, then I'll show him the respect and
I'll
check
give
out
him a chance. You're getting a chance from John.
Yeah. But I mean, it really started there, and had James Caan not given it that name value, who knows what would happen with Bottle Rocket and Wes's career. And that one thing led to another, and Rushmore leads to Tenenbaums, and then by that point he's a success. But have you guys, David, have you seen Bottle Rocket?
I saw it as a rental way back when, and it didn't really catch for me.
Didn't resonate.
Yeah, and I need to go back and watch it, because I've enjoyed I enjoy the Wilsons and I enjoy Wes Anderson. And I don't know. So yeah, it's I don't know. I think I was in a good mood that day.
Well, it's very,
it's an interesting movie.
Yeah, it's very first filmy.
Yeah.
Like the first movie by most major directors isn't, they're not polished yet. It's a little bit off their game from what they would figure out their game to be. And Bottle Rocket's a great example of it. Like, you're on the right track, but not quite there. Rushmore is more fine-tuned. And then for me, like, Tenenbaums is kind of key, prime Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
But, well, I think, Bottle Rocket's on the list for us to cover here on the show down the road. So that'll be an interesting one to look at. And I haven't seen it in a really long time as well. I loved it back then, but who knows, especially seeing where Wes Anderson's gone since then.
Yeah.
But yeah, just so many great roles for James Caan over the years. I met him very in passing at a film festival years ago, and he had already started to kind of wind down his career, and but he had such a presence and was such a personality, and it was intimidating. It's intimidating to be around a guy like that who, you look back at his life, and I don't know if it was before The Godfather, but definitely during the research for Sonny Corleone, he befriended some real life mafia folks and stayed very good friends with them over the years, and has had some loose ties to that world. So that's just kind of interesting. I think fueled some of his other characters, but yeah, just an interesting life, interesting personality, and we're gonna miss James Caan, and but we have a great body of work to look back at, and there's a handful of movies that we can keep doing on this show. So I think we've already named a lot of them.
I enjoy working. I love to work with good people. I have more fun when I'm working, and I have a lot of laughs. And I get respect too sometimes.
That brings us to today. So we are going to look back at 1975's Rollerball, which was when was the last time you guys saw this movie, or is this the first time?
First time for me.
First time for David.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time for me.
Really?
Which is interesting. So I had been aware of Rollerball for quite some time, prior to, I remember the VHS cover from the racks in the video stores back in the day, but I had never seen it. And it's interesting I had never seen it from start to finish. I'm sure I'd seen clips. I'd obviously seen clips of the actual rollerball derby scenes before in certain things here and there, but I was surprised to find out that his team was based out of Houston. And since I'm a Houston kid, I'm surprised this didn't have a bigger part of my childhood. Even going to sporting events or something like that, you'd think on the big Jumbotron, they would have been playing clips, especially that clip where they're all chanting Houston.
That should have been pumped into every Houston stadium.
Absolutely. So I was pleasantly surprised and hooked the moment I started watching it for this, because I was like, oh, this is based in Houston. Yeah, all right, I'm in.
I can picture you sitting down. I picture you putting the movie in. It's starting to play the menu screen. You're getting a drink or some food, your snacks together, and you're about to sit down. And they say Houston team, and you do the double.
I'm like, "Bah? Yeah,
let's go." Your bowl of popcorn's all over the floor. I
was ready. I was ready. I was in it. They were my team. They were my rollerball team from that point forward, without a doubt.
Imagine if it were real. You'd have been there.
It's not real. I was surprised though. In all honesty, I was surprised that I hadn't seen it. when I was younger. I mean, just based on the fact that growing up in Houston, you would have thought at some point it would have been more, I don't know, readily pumped in certain places that would have piqued my curiosity. But for whatever reason, it wasn't.
David, had you heard of Rollerball?
I'd heard about it. I'd heard of it because maybe referenced in other pop culture somewhere along the way too. So, but I had no idea of what it was. I don't even have a memory of like the VHS, like there, and there's a lot of those, like when we do these movies that I'd never seen, but I had an awareness of. It's like I always remember, from the rental houses cover. But this one even sort of evaded me, and then when they made the remake or whatever, and I was like, oh yeah, Rollerball, and I never saw the
Chris Klein classic, with LL Cool J.
We do not talk about that movie here.
Did you see it?
I didn't need to see more than 5 minutes of it.
I saw it. I saw it when it first came out on video back in 2001 ish.
Two, I think. I think it was theaters 2001, and
yeah. So, but so like that kind of looked terrible, and I'm like, oh, if they're, I don't know, I have to check out the other one, and then, it's always been on the list, as it were.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I always remembered. I feel like it was on like you know how they'd have on like in the New York area, it'd be WPIX or WWOR. They'd have afternoon movies like Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon that were like no one's really watching TV, but if you were bored, you would be.
It's on.
I feel like Rollerball was one of those movies, but I also seem to remember like a Rollerball. Maybe it was called Roller Jam or something, like American Gladiators kind of game that was also on Saturday. But I remember there being like an alligator in the middle. Like it was like the movie, obviously not playing to the death, but like I have some memory of that. So
I'm gonna have to search that. I don't recall that, but I believe that it exists.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it spun off of like from the movie, or maybe it was another movie or something like that, but it wasn't Rollerball, this movie, but something related to it. So but and I kind of always knew of it from the video store and loving James Caan and just seeing like, oh, I wonder what the hell this is. Like I should rent this, but I never did until. It was like 2003, I think, when I was I go through phases where I try to plug holes in the movies that I've missed. So I was going through the 70s around that time, and Rollerball was one, and I loved it the first time I saw it. That's the thing about this movie. There are definitely things that date the movie, and it feels very 70s.
Dude, it is a super 70s movie.
Super 70s.
There's no getting around it. Like this is super 70s without a doubt.
Yeah. Which can be really distracting.
It's tough.
And really not just the 70s, but any decade is going to have their movies that are just of that, so intensely of that style.
Yeah.
That you really sometimes have to work harder to try to stay with the story and the meaning behind it, and you have to kind of look past the clothes and the zoom ins and the production design. I was able to do that with this one, but I totally get it that maybe not everybody can.
I felt like at this point in time, like it translates kind of okay, like some of the stylistic choices and some of the architecture for me was all very interesting. So I was like, knowing that none of that shit was in Houston, I was like looking where they filmed this thing. And so some of that was super interesting, I felt like, and I thought that translated well. Cause like, I don't know, I think there's some really interesting architecture that's happening, contemporary stuff that's happening these days. And so I was really kind of interested in that. And so I feel like it translated well, but I can't imagine like, if I'd have watched this in the 90s, it would have been a complete miss for me. Like I would have been like, it's too 70s.
Yeah.
For me to have like been patient enough to see it through.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. David, what about you? Did the 70s-ness of it kind of distract you, or did you mind it?
No, I'm used to this. I hadn't seen a lot of 70s films before I started this podcast, and so the more that we see, the more I just sort of like, I know it's of a different time, but it does feel like it's not like they're all the same to me or anything, but like I was used to sort of the vocabulary of it and sort of even to expect out of like the characters in a sense, like just sort of the, we don't have a hero, we don't have heroes here, and we don't necessarily have like it's not a story of good and evil, it's just sort of like everyone's sort of living a terrible life.
Yeah.
And even the people in power are kind of miserable, terrible, and all that. It's a, that's a very, very loose, just broad stroke of like the style of the time, I think. Like,
yeah,
there's no heroes. It's just but so yeah, I don't know, it didn't distract me. I mean, I love the, like, I guess they're not leisure suits, but those they're like they're civilian clothes is
They're polyester threads.
Yeah.
I like the
threads.
hats. Like I like his little, I don't even know what kind of hat it is, but it's
so yeah, I don't know. It's it is 70s. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I love it when we get to watch a movie that is from a time that is projecting a future that is already in our past. So like, I mean, this is a 1975 movie based in 2018, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're in 2020, and to just kind of like watch it from this perspective is just, I mean, this is obviously not the only movie that this happens, like of course the biggest one is Back to the Future, but I think that this is pretty, or Back to the Future 2, I guess I should say, but this was cool. It was kind of cool to see it.
Yeah, it's funny when movies think they're projecting so far in the future. Terminator 2, we've passed. Like there's a poster that floats around social media where it lays out like the timeline of all these sci-fi movies, and right now we are in the year of Soylent Green. So yeah, so that's right now, and I think we just passed Blade Runner as well. And so yeah, those are kind of fun to track. But I think they're, looking beyond that, thematically, we're in a very similar period of time as far as unrest among the people,
social class systems and
Yep.
things like that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and lack of trust for the government and the people in charge, and a sense of rebellion happening with all of the, feels like many situations out there that are dividing, specifically in this country, that it feels to me very similar to what happened in the 70s, in the post-Vietnam, post-Nixon era, that so many of these movies are tied to.
Well, I mean, in this movie directly, like there's not even a government. The government is corporations. Executives run the country, which, a lot of people would argue in America, that's not too far off from the truth these days.
Right.
So, I mean, it's pretty uncanny, but yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Big business kind of controls everything.
Yeah. And to your point, the not trusting the government, similar to like when we watch The Conversation, right? Like, I mean, it's just that time frame very much in the 70s where there was a big lack of trust in the government coming out of Vietnam and, Watergate right around that area. I mean, it's yeah. So.
Yeah, especially, post Watergate, you have the 70s conspiracy films really starting with The Conversation that go through, you have and all it's like almost all the stars of the day starred in one of those movies.
Yeah.
There's The Conversation, there's All the President's Men, there's Marathon Man, there's 3 Days of the Condor, Rollerball I would put in there, It goes on and on. Parallax View, Clute even, but so it's interesting how that this kind of still. This movie feels like such a mix because it's so dated in so many ways, but is underneath those layers still very relevant.
Seems kind of current.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plot wise, in this setting, there is no more war, there is no more government. The business has basically taken it over, and Rollerball has become the focus of it's. I was unclear if is it the only sport or just the biggest sport that's out there?
It's the
Did they
sport
say
that replaced war? I don't know, because all the battle and all the violence and all the gruesome blood of war is all on the floor in the roller arena.
Yeah, and where teams from various cities all over the world sort of almost represent that country and play to the death, really. That it's a David, how would you describe like the actual sport of rollerball?
How do I describe the sport of rollerball?
Like it's a mix of different, of a few different existing sports, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, it's like it's roller derby, it's football, it's
Quidditch.
Quidditch.
Definitely Quidditch. There's a quaffle.
What's the sport where you relays?
Lacrosse?
No, like in track and field, you pass the baton. Is that
a relay race?
Yeah.
So it's like a relay race, and I mean, so it's taking the best elements of every sport and putting it on roller skates.
Motocross, I'd say.
Motocross.
You've got motorcycles involved and
wrestling. I mean,
hockey,
wrestling, boxing.
Yeah, it's pretty much it's a free for all.
Maybe not so much baseball. That might be the only, and maybe no golf, but otherwise,
well, almost golf. You got to get that hole in one.
Yeah, you got to get the ball in the hole.
Yep.
That curved basket's hard.
That heavy steel ball.
Yeah, which is insane. Like so they basically play on a rink, where kind of like a NASCAR in a way, that they're just going around this track.
Yeah.
And this, like, what seems to be, based on the sound of it being ejected, this like heavy metal ball, right?
Yeah.
You can also use.
It is. It's definitely a heavy metal ball. There's even a moment in the movie where he's like giving instruction and he drops the ball onto the ground and it just goes clank.
Yeah.
It's a big heavy metal ball.
Yeah. And you play to the death. There's no penalties for, some of the players get run over by motorcycles, they get stabbed, they get beaten to death, they get just like teamed up on, and they're just dragged out of the game. And
I will say, for as tough as you got to be to play this game, there's some pretty featherweight deaths that occur in this arena. But yeah, you play to the death. I mean, some people get hit in the back of the head with spiked gloves. That's pretty gnarly.
Yeah, that's yeah.
I mean, if they get too injured,
I feel like they've rolled down the arena and they're like, oh.
yeah.
Well, that's the escalation of violence in film. That what seemed super violent then is nothing now.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, like the first, that first 15-minute sequence, like the first half of it didn't seem that violent, and then suddenly people were getting massacred, like mauled,
right,
and all that. But you can substitute. You don't necessarily have to die, but you're probably gonna.
Yeah.
You're gonna
do. That's okay. It's part of the game.
You're gonna get hurt at a minimum,
right? But that's why Jonathan E is such a standout. Where James Caan is the standout guy, this all-star, this number one guy who's been around the league for too long. So does he have the juice to keep going, or should he be forced out like the way they want him. He's too powerful. He should have died years ago or retired.
He's
Right.
Tom Brady.
Yeah, but
He is Tom Brady, but he's
Tom Brady.
yeah.
But I don't know.
Tom Brady's calling his own shots, though. He's retiring when he wants. He's coming back after retirement whenever he wants.
Yeah,
He's not getting forced out, you know.
No corporate NFL person wants Tom Brady to leave the league. That's like,
well, yeah, but I mean, just like star caliber wise.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
You know,
yeah,
he's Michael Jordan. He's Tom Brady. He's Wayne Gretzky. You know, that level.
Yeah,
and we celebrate these people in reality. For they're obviously very talented people, but in the world of rollerball, to be a standout is to be dangerous. That's dangerous for everyone else.
Can somebody explain that part to me? Like, what 75% of the movie is James Caan trying to figure out why they're trying to boot him from rollerball, right? And then his buddy at one point is like, they're scared of you. They're scared of you, Jonathan. Yeah. But like, why? Why are they scared of him?
I think they're worried about his popularity is going to give him a certain amount of control and power potentially. So they see a threat with him. So it's time to just retire him.
Yeah, but we see that other people that are popular rollerball players from the past can become executives, right? I mean, that's what his friend is.
Right.
So like, I don't understand what that means. And then like, as you watch, I mean, we haven't gotten into the cast, but like the John Houseman character, like he's like the top dog, but he's getting pushed out as well because he's not able to get Jonathan Eat or James Caan to retire. It's all very 70s and all doesn't really like congeal. Like,
I mean, I think that is part of the the downside of the movie is sort of a lack of clarity of the why of it all.
Right.
I'm not gonna disagree with you on that. I think that is a kind of weak part of the film.
Yeah, you need to read into it a bit more, and I think it's like, and I don't think it's presented as well as it could have been. But it's putting everybody in their colors, and and everyone roots for their side, and it's like you're just Houston. They only wear numbers on their thing, but people start to know. I think the idea was like, to be a standout, to be someone the crowd cheers for individually, means like he has a platform and like he could be dangerous, whereas they need everyone to fall in line and just play the game, and it's just sort of like, you can play the game and then you can retire and have an easy life, but you keep sticking around, and like that's bad for keeping everybody in like groups, so which I think is kind of like the idea of like, if you're not thinking for yourself, you're a drone, and that's sort of the message of like, this is kind of a bad situation.
Well, and I'm all for that. Like, I get that as like the driving force of what he's trying to figure out. Like for me, I'd be all in, but
I don't think it's
it's not explained very well. It's very unclear. Like it's got a lot of holes.
Yeah. I mean, and we see the government / business, who's in control. Just they control everything that happens, who plays, how long they play,
right?
Even into the personal life of
who you're dating, and
who you're. We learn early on in the story that he has, prior to the movie, his wife or girlfriend, who was played by Maud Adams, has been taken from him and given to another executive because they're higher up the chain. So they get sort of first pick of whoever they want. It doesn't matter if they're with somebody or not. And he's never really recovered emotionally from that. We see.
And it's kind of interesting, like his relationship with the other women in his life kind of mirror the whole relationship of the executives and him, as far as like in Rollerball. Like he's just, like he's like with a lady, he's like run, their relationship has run their course, and he's just like, see you later. And then they just send him another woman to have a relationship with. And it's like, it's very similar to, hey, I'm the star. Oh, you've run your course. See you later. We've got this new guy. What's his name? Moonshine or Moon
Pie.
Moon Pie.
Yeah.
Coming in. He's the new big guy. It's very similar how it works.
Yeah.
But
to be a victim of the system but means you can still be a part of the system.
Oh, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So like that's the allure of being in part of the system. Like to have a little more power, to be a little bit up on the food chain, but that doesn't mean you're at the top of the food chain. So it is like that's the commentary on being part of corporations and government and all that. There's a realistic skepticism over the government, particularly in the 70s, right? And then and of course, and perpetuates through time. No one's ever been fully behind the government, but then also like the warning of don't trust the corporations either. They don't have your interests at heart. And that's sort of like it's so but also I think the commentary is like as people just pick one or the other, like who to trust.
Well, and that's the thing, like even in the party scene, like they don't even know who is in charge, right? Like they're like, even the executives, the people who are higher up, like they're asking like, okay, so who's doing this? Like who's making these calls? And like no one has an answer. Like it's just, it's a faceless controller,
Exactly. We think it's John Houseman. It seems like it's John Houseman, but then we learn it's not, and he's in trouble himself. But
yes,
that there's always somebody bigger and higher up and who we never even know. It goes so high up we don't have no idea who that person is or those people.
Yeah.
And that could be, the dark money where people aren't actually in the corporations or in the government, there's no government, but it's just money being funneled in, and they call the shots, like that happens in our political system.
Yeah,
I think it's Zero. I think Zero is the one in control.
Could be Zero
at the World Library.
Yeah, that was an interesting scene, huh?
It is also one I'm not exactly sure, like what sense does it really make? There's a lot of those in here. It's like, they just kind of throw something in. But again, I like the aesthetic. I like the look. All the architecture for all the buildings is really fascinating and unique, I think. But some of the story, it's just like, I feel like maybe sometimes in the 70s, they let people just get away with like big gaping unexplained story parts that are just like, whatever, just make it look cool and it'll be all right.
That was what the 70s was that
I guess they still do that,
but no, they had way more creative control then than they do now. Directors had then than they do now. That's what New Hollywood was moving. We've talked about here many times, moving out the old Hollywood studio system, and young producers who were very in touch with, modern life had taken over the studios and were like Robert Evans, were giving a really long rope to the writers and directors of the day and letting them tell their stories without having a sort of corporate agenda behind it. And it was just almost a cathartic storytelling going on. And that being said, sometimes you got The Godfather, and sometimes you got things that are, Heaven's Gate, and movies that are completely out of control and go over budget, over schedule, directors that are just, you can't reel them back in at all. Well, this is Norman Jewison. So he'd been around for a bit. He'd done some big movies already. So he wasn't one of the he wasn't born in the 70s like a lot of the filmmakers were. Okay. He really started up in the 60s, where he did In the Heat of the Night, which is a fantastic film. And a lot of these have kind of like rebellious themes that seem to come up quite often for him. In the Heat of the
Yep.
Night, the Thomas Crown Affair, the Cincinnati Kid, Fiddler on the Roof,
Fiddler. Jesus Christ
Yes.
Superstar? Come on.
Jesus Christ Superstar. After this,
Yeah.
he would do Fist with Stallone, which is, I think, kind of a similar kind of themes to Rollerball, and Justice for All with Pacino. Much later on, probably his biggest movie is Moonstruck. And
Yeah, you're right. I completely wrong guy. I was getting him confused with someone else. Totally.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, he did a ton of stuff.
Yeah,
But okay.
Not a ton of music videos, but
No, not a ton
maybe
of
there's some
videos
music
at all.
videos peppered in there.
could be.
yeah.
Scorsese did music videos. Come on.
Sure, he did Bad, didn't he?
Did Bad, and he did something else. Didn't he do?
Did he do Black or White?
No, maybe.
He did something around that. It was the late 80s.
He might have did that, and he might have did like the Egyptian Pharaoh one with Eddie Murphy is in the
Party All the Time, that one?
no. Remember the Time, something like that.
Oh,
Whatever.
yeah.
Anyway,
But yeah, Norman Jewison, I think, is a fantastic director who I wouldn't say it's, maybe he got let a little bit loose on this one, but
I think
I think a lot of his focus is clearly on the actual like shooting of the game itself, because there's so much story being told during the actual Rollerball games, especially the finale.
And I think part of it is like, yeah, he probably had too much control. So whereas a studio might say, look, you need to kind of be more obvious about this, the audiences won't understand or something. I don't know, but I think there's like still an innate trust of audiences that directors like, yeah, no, they'll get it, or someone's going to explain it to them. It's got to be it's the artistic integrity has to remain.
Yeah, like all the dots don't need to be connected.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
But some of these dots probably should have been.
Yeah.
You can still deftly do it without pandering to like a third grade audience, which is like
Right.
what it feels like when they get these notes, right? For a lot of directors, I'm sure it's like, you got to be kidding me. Like, isn't it obvious?
Yeah.
Or at least like, no, the point is to find the interpretation. It's got to be. But yeah. So I think it just it takes it, like we do. It takes an extra bit of reading. I don't think you walk out of that movie for the first time understanding it totally. Like, you really have to think about the culture of the time and all that. I mean, that's the thing. There may have been a shorthand in the 70s for the public to understand it anyway, and probably just like decide whether or not they actually agree with it.
Would you say that there's similarities between Rollerball and Gladiator?
I kind of think so, right?
Thematically, plot wise, right? I mean, not exactly beat for beat, but there's similarities.
Yeah, I think so. I think Gladiator takes its cues from this kind of story, right? Because what's his face was becoming too much of a
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe is becoming too much of a commodity. He's becoming and he didn't want a name, but they loved him, and the emperor kind of had to continue to pander and be loved.
Yeah.
by letting him fight.
The class system was a little more kind to those that played Rollerball than they did in Gladiator. But
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that jump, watching it this time, it did jump out at me that it felt like the rich, executives watching from above, much like Roman gladiators.
For sure.
That's very, very, very much the same thing kind of happening here. The script was written by William Harrison based on his. This was a short story that was released in Esquire magazine in 1973, so a pretty quick turnaround. I don't remember really like how. I guess just magazine sales, right? That would kind of determine how popular something like that would be at the time. I don't know how they measured it really.
I mean, I don't know. Was it made because it was an Esquire, or did someone just read it in Esquire? Because I feel like there's short stories and articles that get seen and read, and people like, oh, that's great, we should make this.
Yeah. Well, we talked about that, like even on National Lampoon's Vacation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how Shark Tale came about. It was based on a 1991 Time magazine article.
Everybody knows about Shark Tale. Everyone knows the tale of Shark Tale.
I think that's true. I think that's what I heard. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah, so it goes into pretty quick development, and Norman Jewison, I think, is probably one of the top directors of the day here. I mean, this is really just prior to Spielberg, becoming a big deal, and Norman Jewison's got pretty great credits already to this point, and working with big stars. So it actually seems like a really good fit, a good choice for someone to slide in and take over a movie like this that always seem to question authority. So in his prior films, whether it was Sidney Poitier or Steve McQueen in a couple of films, that always that rebellious nature. So I think Norman was a good choice here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the rest of the cast. I mean, there's not a lot of household names here, but there is John Houseman.
Yeah.
Who we talked a little bit about on our. I think this is the third time he's shown up here at ReconCinemation. He makes an appearance in John Carpenter's The Fog and Scrooged as well. He's the narrator, right? For the show.
Scrooged?
Yeah, Scrooged. Yeah. Classic actor, well cast here, believable as the villain of the film.
He was
Really
great in this. He was awesome as the owner of the Houston team. That scene at the end of the first Rollerball competition, when they're in the locker room and he's going around giving the pep talk and like handing moon pie, like some kind of pill to get him all like, I mean, everything that's going on there and the way it's choreographed and his delivery of all the lines. And it's really, really, I think maybe one of the better like scenes carried by dialogue and not the actual rollerball competition.
Yeah. I mean, he's essentially drugging the players in what I imagine is something like cocaine or steroids or something to like just fire them up right before the game.
Sure.
Yeah, interesting to kind of twist on that character, that just really well played by him.
Yeah.
Maud Adams, who we mentioned, was coming off of The Man with the Golden Gun, so she's a Bond girl. One of the only people, if not the only person, to play two different Bond girls, both in Roger Moore movies.
Huh.
Is that right?
Yeah, she's in The Man with the Golden Gun, and then she appears in Octopussy, completely different character.
Does she have like a distinguishing mole that they put on her face so she looks like a different character?
No, not at all.
In one movie, it's on one cheek, and in the other, it's on the other cheek.
But the whole relationship with her character and Jonathan E is I mean, it's tragic, really, that she's really the love of his life, who was taken away from him, given to somebody else, which is a commentary on women's role in society as well, that they're shining a light on. Obviously, we have some serious issues in today's world as well. But then she reappears, 3/4 of the way through the movie, as sort of a way, as sort of an attempt by the executives to kind of manipulate him and get them like, oh, okay, well, you can have her back. You can have her back if you just stop playing.
Yeah. I think there's like a much larger story at work that you can only see it from the perspective of Jonathan E. Like how high does it really go? Like he could he have eventually led a rebellion against the corporate government over time? I could see a 4-season HBO epic miniseries of Jonathan E. leads the Houston Rebels, because that's what they did in Texas. They rebelled.
That's
Right? Or is that true?
There's some of that.
There's some.
You could make a great like 8-episode series of Rollerball.
Yeah.
Like
You
HBO
could.
style. You really could.
Yeah. Connect all the dots. Make it.
Don't make it as crazy as Westworld.
Right. Okay. I haven't seen the
as,
latest season, but
I
actually haven't seen any season past season 1. So
I'm considering
so not just the latest, but almost all the other.
I haven't seen really much of it.
You've only seen 25%.
I missed the last episode and the 35 before that.
That's right. So no spoilers, guys. I'm rushing to get through that one.
What were you gonna say, David?
Not as crazy as Westworld, but make it as fun as the Hunger Games or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
There you go.
Which the Hunger Games probably owes a lot to these kinds of stories from the 70s.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's all the I don't read YA fiction, as it were, but it seems like all the popular ones are about, you know, a sort of a hero, what do you call it, a accidental hero against some sort of machine system in place that, you know, in either a dystopian future or you know, a corporate
or wizarding world of some sort.
Yeah, so there's always like it's always about a battle against the shadow people in power, right? And how there can be success. I don't know, that might be really way off, but that's what it seems like for me.
Yeah, no, totally hear that.
Which is good. It's good. Teens shouldn't trust anybody. That's the message of teenagers.
Just always question. Always
be questioning.
Yeah,
right?
Just their high school friends. That's the only people they should trust, because they're the ones in the long run that are going to show you the way.
Especially the one dude's older brother Steve, who got you pot that for the first
that
time
afternoon. Yeah.
Only trust those guys.
I do have to mention John Beck, who plays Moon Pie in this film. John Beck was one of the great actors who appeared for multiple seasons on a little show called Dallas.
Oh,
my favorite.
He played the character of Mark Grayson, who tries successfully, sometimes unsuccessfully, others to take Pam Ewing away from Bobby. Very long storyline there, goes multiple seasons. But you know, you guys know how close I am with the show Dallas. So
do I ever?
Yeah, and he appears on Walker, Texas Ranger. So he's a very Brent. You should love John Beck. He's a very Texas centric actor.
Is he from Texas? I mean, he's based in Houston for this. He's based
in Dallas.
Austin. Where the hell's Where's Walker, Texas Ranger based out of?
I think it's either Austin or Dallas.
I know the production offices, I think, were just outside Dallas.
Yeah, so it's got to be there, because they have like half the cast of Dallas shows up, like the whole crew just switched over to that show. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, John Beck was born in Chicago, though.
Close. Chicago's very close to Texas.
He's got a Texas look to him, though. I'm not gonna lie. He's got a little swagger.
Illinois and Texas are virtually next to each other.
Virtually not anything alike.
John Beck has a Longhorn birthmark on his shoulder.
Uh-oh.
For a movie about a Houston sports team, I was shocked at the lack of Longhorns and the outline of the state of Texas just plastered.
Dude, what are you talking about? No. Jonathan E. had a big old set of Longhorns hanging up in his house.
That's right.
Listen, man.
But where were the tattoos and the,
it
stuff
was
in
the
the
70s.
locker
They wanted if this was based in 2022.
The drink coasters
many
would be shaped like
tattoos.
Drink coasters are in the shape of Texas.
Oh, for sure.
The
What do you?
pool tables
it was a very non-Texas Texas.
I know.
For sure. Considering all the buildings were in Germany and
exactly.
Switzerland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't really go outside too much, and yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about what happens to the Moon Pie character? I felt very sad the first time I saw that. It's essentially an execution.
Yeah. It's a bummer.
That's what they do.
I mean, he's the guy who gets punched in the back of the head with a spike.
But held like one arm by two guys are holding his arms back, and then the other goes from behind him and just
hits him. Yeah, and he goes into a coma or some kind of
brain
vegetative
dead
state.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tragic, man. It's for sure. It's tragic. He's the young kid on his way up, and he gets taken out.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's in a lot of ways. It seems like he's Jonathan's sort of closest friend at the time.
Yeah, his sort of protege as well.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of, like he's obviously the one that's, being trained and is going to take over the team whenever Jonathan does retire, even if it's on his own accord versus being forced out.
Yeah. Well, and it's that death that really, I think, takes the seriousness of the situation for Jonathan and ratchets it up a few notches. That he's saddened by that, but knows now he really is. He's playing for his life, and that the finale against Tokyo, right? Tokyo is a lot of people are going to go down, and he's going to have to be at his best if he's going to make it through. I really love that the entire end of the film, the entire end rollerball game against Tokyo. I like how slow paced it is, or not slow paced. It's fast paced, but we see what feels like so much of that game.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. People light on fire. It's like everything happens in that game.
Yeah, and it's violence at its at its peak in that one. That one by one, like everybody on both of these teams are going down,
except for one man.
and you see like bodies just like left on the what do you call it? Like on the track, yeah. They're just like those people must be dead. Other people are just like gravely wounded, and we see them getting carted off one after another. But the like motorcycles, and they're like holding people's heads on the track when they fire the ball out. Like it's just brutal.
Yeah.
But I love that the intensity that as the game goes on, and it ends up just like two people on motorcycles, or one on a motorcycle, one on skates, against just James Caan. That's all that's left, and that he's got and the track is on fire, and it's just like carnage everywhere, and he's all that's left, and he's got to take out two of them, which he does. And that final moment where he with no music, it's quiet, he just slams he's won. He slams the final point in, and it's just 1-0. Like they won. That was the only score of the game after all that.
After all that.
All those people had to die, and he's the last one left. And he scores and it's like this brutality of the sport is what draws everybody, keeps everyone entertained, right?
Yeah.
Like just the savagery. I can't say that it's not like a commentary on some of the more barbaric sports of the modern day. But it was if you can't have war, you can have organized sports, and that's what will entertain everybody.
Just great. I love this sort of ambiguous ending too, is after he scores and it's just silent, like nobody's cheering, everyone's just kind of in shock of how far that game went. And his coach, played by Shane Rimmer, who's another actor who's been just all over the place. He's in multiple James Bond movies. He's in Superman. He's in Star Wars. He's in, I think the last time we saw him was in The Dark Knight. He's got like one shot of him in like a train station, and but he's been all over the place for years. And he just, they just start to say his name, Jonathan, and just repeat it, and building and building and building. And we watch John Houseman, and exactly what he's feared is happening now. That now Jonathan, as being the sole survivor, has won everybody over, and that he's in control and he's in charge, and everyone is following his lead, and we just follow him around the track until we get that real James Caan look, that intense fiery look as he kind of skates almost right into the camera. And then of course we get our 70s freeze frame ending.
Right.
But ambiguous of what happens next. We don't know. Could this go beyond the sport of rollerball, and does Jonathan lead sort of like a revolution that's kind of indicated?
Could be.
Or is it just that's his final moment, and the corporation's gonna is still gonna find a way to eliminate him?
No, I think my interpretation of it is, now because the corporation got involved and was trying to force him out and force him to retire and change the rules of rollerball prior to that final match, so there's no penalties and it's total brutality. Like, they have created the scenario that they were afraid of in the first place. And so he's leaving to overthrow the corporations because of what they have done, where they've kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, and it's in a weird way, I guess it's a sense of hope, right?
75 hope, like 90 hope in 75. Yeah,
hope in 75. Yeah. So it's a little more
loose grasp of hope.
It's a little more of it's not as, so a lot of the 70s movies we've talked about have downer endings, where the hero is doomed, is how we're left. And here, in a way, it's a little bit more of a different spin on that maybe there's more of an upside, that he may not live, but he's gonna get everyone to fight back. So interesting. Music, the music was interesting in the film. Bach juxtaposing kind of all the barbaric sport of rollerball, and opening the film and then closing it over the end credits, that you have this classical music playing over this, just people murdering each other, really.
Yeah, and then and that's not that tune you classically assigned to like Dracula or something like that, isn't that right? Vampires.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
sort of like this spooky haunted gothic places.
Yep. Yeah, interesting to use that here.
Yeah. That's all.
But, yeah, the cinematography, it was shot by Douglas Slocum, who would go on to shoot Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I think photography wise, this was really well done. I mean, these are just covering the game itself is challenging. So it looks good. I think I like how the arena kind of, even though it's supposed to be massive, like does have an intimate feel to it when you're down there on the track.
Yeah.
And the lighting, gets darker and darker in that last game where it looks like we're almost lit just with firelight.
Yeah, it gets pretty savage out there, where because that's the interesting thing about, like, the shots are kind of brutal with when the violence is occurring, because it's right in your face, and you're not getting wide shots to show you enough, like you're getting them to set sort of the the next sequence, but like, you know, you're right in it with it, and you're living with the brutality, and the audience, and like you can tell like the audience generally is not in the arena when they're shooting it, like from the track level.
Yeah.
But they're like this, but it's a faceless crowd, really, you know. I mean, they're trying to shoot around it, but then of course you cut to the audience when you need it, and then of course they're there at the end, like they're, you know, there's some against the fence, but it is this sort of thing, like the audience doesn't necessarily have to be there. You just pump up an audience sound into an empty arena for these guys who have to, you know, kill each other.
Yeah. There's another scene that really kind of fascinated me and was disturbing, was when the executives are at the party, and then afterwards, and they kind of split off and go outside and light a tree on fire, just basically just because they can.
It's the most Clockwork Orange scene in the whole movie. Yeah. Like, I mean, another 75, but that scene especially reminds me of A Clockwork Orange, you know? And I'm like, it's just like nonsensical destruction and violence. I'm like, what is
that they're getting off on, you know, that they're like excited and turned on by about. Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's just kind of depressing.
Yeah. What would you do if you could? I'd burn a tree down.
Yeah. And we really know so little about that society in the world of this, like outside of this sport and the people related to it. Like, we don't really know much of what life is like, and, you know, what the class system really is. We know there's an upper class, but is there even a middle class anymore? Or is it just kind of lower and upper? Who knows?
Well, there's the executives, which seem to be the royalty, right? And then if the lower class is like the rollerball players, which doesn't seem quite accurate because they seem pretty well off.
Right.
I mean,
they're almost part of the upper class by association.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't.
But you have to imagine there's a lower. You would think there's a lower class than that somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, he said, but there's supposedly no poverty, right? Everyone has. That was described in the society when Houseman was talking to him, right? Like, so, you know, there's no war, there's no poverty, everyone is basically fine, but all they have to do is follow the corporation.
Yeah.
So there probably is
for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Just follow. So yeah, I don't know. I maybe if there's no poverty, then I guess like there is no like people suffering in that way in terms of like everyone has shelter, I guess, you know, but do they all have 12-hour a day jobs and they live in a small little cube instead of like a house? Like, who knows? You know, it's all that's what's great about these stories is like it points to a very larger world that's an oppressive force, but you can't really do anything about the oppressive force, so you take care of it at your small level. Like it's here in this game, you know, like I guess like you know, not every the story of just living within sort of a dystopia or a terrible place, like it shouldn't be about trying to topple the regimes. Like most of the stories are just human stories of you know, man versus nature, or man versus like, you know, business. Like what is that a classic storytelling conflict? Is that one of the 13 conflicts? Man versus business.
Man versus business.
Anyway.
Yeah.
This episode's brought to you by Coca-Cola, but
this episode has been sponsored by Valvoline.
Yeah. So to go back to some of those, just what you were talking about earlier, John, the rollerball sequences and stuff like this. Apparently, this was the first movie to ever credit, or the first Hollywood movie to ever credit the stunt people, like the stuntmen and that were part of that.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, because the action sequences were so integral to the movie that they
It's
they gave
all
them credit.
other than James Caan and John Beck, it's all stunt people.
Right.
Yep.
And even that, obviously, like some of those guys' work is going to be stunts, but there's some great. I mean, there's definitely some like intense, especially for the time period, intense stunt work going on, and these guys are flipping around and getting tossed around, and yeah, they well, good. This is the good news for stunt workers everywhere.
Yeah,
absolutely,
for sure.
You would think,
made it,
like,
guys. Good work.
You think, like, if you redid Rollerball, I figure you'd have a lot of women on the team too. You'd have a lot of this is all men fighting wars.
Yeah,
no women on the front line. So women have a certain place in the movie and in the society, I guess.
Yeah, redoing it now, sure. Yeah,
I think even in the 2002 version they had
they must have,
on
right?
on the Rollerball team.
Guys, I took that. I remember only.
I think there's a
was
pretty
sort
lady
of
on the poster
against it, but then I heard that there was some WWF people involved at the time, so then I was kind of intrigued. But then 5 minutes was enough that I was done.
You watched the first 5 minutes and you were out.
Yep.
You've watched the first 5.
Maybe 5 and a half.
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not like. Hey,
it's not doing good on IMDb.
it's not really worth going back and watching now. But yeah, there's definitely they have.
Well, because it was a hokey take on it. It wasn't like this is excuse me. This is obviously a serious film with like a serious subtext going on.
Yeah.
Like that was a light fluff action movie.
Yeah.
It was not. There's no real depth to it, and I think Westworld proved that you could take a weird, kind of quirky, highly stylized '70s movie and make it a successful, reboot, redo. And I could definitely see the same thing for Rollerball.
Yeah,
I would say I don't know what influenced the 2002 movie to go the direction that they decided to go with all of it, but I feel like they could make a truer remake to the 1975 version today and it would be hella worth seeing. But the 2002 version, I don't know what it is. I mean, it was directed by McTiernan. He's done some great shit.
Yeah.
So
he was but by that point it had been a minute since he directed anything. Well, I guess Thomas Crown Affair was okay. That was a few years before. So yeah. They're not all wins.
How interesting. See, now McTiernan, who did the remake of Rollerball, did the remake of Thomas Crown Affair.
Oh.
So he's just raining on Norman Jewison's parade.
He's like, I'm going to take all your movies.
Yeah, that is.
That's
now
wild.
that I have my directors straight and I realize that this is not the director that I was originally thinking. Yeah, Jewison did Thomas Crown Affair.
Who do you think it was, Mick G?
I am going to tell you in the post credits of this because it's too embarrassing to admit that I watched the movie that I watched in general. So
just real quick, the Rollerball. This is probably not official, but the 2000 Rollerball, 2002. The plot synopsis on IMDb. The big thing in 2005 is a violent sport, which can have some pretty serious consequences, like dying. And that's it. That's all it is.
That's it.
Like dying.
Like dying.
Pretty serious consequence.
A sport where you could die. And I think that's cool. I kind of want to check it out. Rebecca Romaine's in it with Chris Klein and LL Cool J.
Yeah.
And Jean Reno. Okay.
Oh, forget it. Chris Klein, I'm there.
Chris Klein.
Well, I mean, I have to say, like, on paper.
Yeah.
On paper, that's good. That's a fun movie.
I feel like Chris Klein's the weakest link in this whole situation.
Well,
right?
but this is
not to piss on Chris Klein. Hey, I'm a huge American Pie fan.
Yeah, and this is right after American Pie 2, which was huge.
Yeah, absolutely. They were trying to make him. I get why he's in it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But like,
is it the right fit?
Hindsight being 2020 and all. Chris Klein.
Chris Klein had a nice recurring role on the American version of Wilfred, starring Elijah Wood.
Ah,
and he was very good in it.
I believe that.
He was really good. I was really happy to have a really nice Chris Klein performance.
Yeah, I'm not trying to take away from Chris Klein. I think that his action career did not necessarily go the direction that we thought it would go.
Yeah,
maybe at some point.
Honestly, like we have not seen Chris Klein in quite some time.
Yeah,
we've been
Kleinless. It's been a minute.
I mean, he did the Street Fighter movie. I think he played a cop.
He's done a ton of TV, so like he's been in the Flash. You know, I mean, and the Flash. The Flash is a pretty rock solid DC universe TV show. If you're following along, I lost track because they started doing a bunch of mixed episodes with like Supergirl and Arrow,
the
crossovers that I just wasn't watching the other episodes, so I was lost. But the Flash is decent. But Sweet Magnolias, look, Benchwarmers 2, guys. Benchwarmers.
Rest in peace, Chris Klein. Oh, wait, is that who are we? Who are we here for?
Oh yeah,
I apologize for the Chris Klein tangent.
That's we talk about him on the Klein cast.
Separate show.
Yeah, my bad. Head on over to the Kleincast.
I just don't want to be hating on Chris Klein, guys. That's all I'm saying.
No one's accusing you of that. Don't worry.
Yeah. Except Chris Klein. He just texted me.
I feel accusations.
He's not the reason that movie failed. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
No.
So James Caan going into this is he had such just looking at a few of his credits prior to this, starts off with working with Coppola actually and the Rain People in I think 68 or 69. I just watched another movie called Countdown that he and Robert Duvall are in about kind of a conspiracy theory astronaut film, which was kind of fun. All that prior to The Godfather. Then he does The Godfather, where he, along with everybody in that movie, becomes stars, between Caan and Pacino and Talia Shire and Duvall, like all of them were new faces that suddenly like they're all nominated for Oscars. And John Cazale, the great John Cazale, nominated for Oscars, and then they're all leading actors on their own. After The Godfather, he does a movie called Slither. He does The Gambler, which is a great film. I discovered that only really a few years ago, and it was so good. Freebie and the Bean, which is like then he gets into this comedy. Like there's this other side of James Caan. There's the violent kind of gangster or cop side, and then there's the I like doing like wacky comedies and musicals and Barbara Streisand movies like Funny Lady.
Oh, wow.
And then turning right around and doing a Sam Peckinpah movie with Robert Duvall called The Killer Elite, which is a bizarre movie that I've seen many times. And it's a great role for James Caan, but it's clearly a Sam Peckinpah who is on, let's just say, mind-altering, items that were influencing that movie, and you can tell there's some stuff going on there. But great performance by Caan and Duvall, and they're such a great pair. They've done a number of movies together, and it's always fun to see them bouncing off of each other. But then he does Rollerball, which is unlike anything like his previous films. So, and looking at his track record, it just continues. He does all kinds of movies, and maybe the movies aren't great all the time, but he's another guy whose performance is always he's always at 100%. Now that we've talked about Rollerball, is it time? Could it be time for box office glory?
Yeah.
All right. Now we've established that there are not a lot of solid numbers for films prior to 81 and 80. Really, I guess maybe Star Wars. They didn't really track it quite the same as they do now. So not a lot of detailed info out there, but the production did have a $5 to $6 million budget, It was released June 25th, 1976, and it pulled in a domestic run of $30 million. So that's a pretty good size hit for that day.
How much did it cost?
5 to 6.
5 to 6, making 30. Yeah, come on.
Yeah. So a hit for James Caan, a hit for Norman Jewison. It ends up ranking number 11 of 1975. Now remember, they released a lot fewer films back then, so it's ahead of The Adventure of the Wilderness Family. Not familiar with that.
Didn't see that one.
Don't know what that is.
But it couldn't quite. Rollerball could not quite take down the mighty Apple Dumpling Gang.
Hey, listen, Don Knotts.
Hey, and Tim Conway, right?
Those dudes are national treasures. They should be.
Yeah,
they were in the 80s.
They yes,
absolutely.
So couldn't quite take down the Apple Dumpling Gang, but there it is. It's still financially successful. So thinking about this, comparing it to some of the other conspiracy theory films of the Big Brother is watching you films from the 70s. I love Rollerball. I don't think it's quite as strong as some of the other ones we mentioned earlier, Marathon Man and Network and All the President's Men, 3 Days of the Condor. But it's right up there with them. I wouldn't say it's as strong, just because of part of what we talked about, that there's some stretches and things that are unclear about the plot and how some of these things are connected. So I think that's kind of the only thing that really holds it back.
Yeah, it's in the family, right?
Yeah. What do you guys think?
It's the RC Cola of the soda aisle, right? It's if these conspiracy movies were the soda aisle, this is RC Cola, right? It's got a place, but
you're gonna drink it at somewhere. You're gonna find it at
people
parties.
will drink it, but it's there's better conspiracy theory movies out there.
Yeah.
So take it back to the grocery store. Anyway.
But what do you guys think? I feel like it's relevant today. What do you guys think thematically?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, and we touched on it earlier in the show, but I think absolutely, like, a lot of just the social class system and government or people, whoever the power entity is that's kind of pulling the strings, certainly is relevant in today's society.
Our American society, there's a large enough contingent that would like nothing more than the government to be dismantled and all of us to be ruled by authoritarians in power with a lot of money. There's an actual contingent of people that want fascism, and we're at a point where Rollerball could become a real thing in like 20 years because we'll have delved deep into that if things continue the way some people in power want them to be. So that's my conspiracy theory for 2022.
You mean that's not going to happen by 2018?
Yeah, exactly. We're halfway there.
I think there's a lot of connective tissue to what's going on politically right now, and but again, you have to look past. Speaking of the film, like, you have to look past the 70s-ness of it style wise, and that can be tough for some people. But to really just latch on to what's being said underneath it all.
There were a lot of characters going around saying, "Hey, that's dynamite." It's so 70s.
Yeah.
That's dynamite, baby. Keep it up.
Okay.
Overall, I love the film. I'm very partial to James Caan. I've always been partial to him, and I'm more often than not going to give his movies a chance just because he's in them.
Yeah.
And sadly, he's no longer with us, and all we have of him is what's left in the films he did and the TV shows that he did, and just a huge body of work that we can keep going back to. And you like funny James Caan? There's funny. There's comedies to look at. There's gangster movies. There's The Program. Just so many movies that are all across the board that he always gave a great performance. And as we just watched Misery here in my house a few weeks ago, and just such a great, he could play such a tough guy, but then he's someone who's trapped and abused and plays that almost the polar opposite, who has PTSD and is afraid of someone who's captured him, and just great roles. So we're gonna miss him. And again, you can check out our podcast on Thief. Now we've got Rollerball, and there'll be plenty more James Caan in our future, but we wanted to take a minute here, and I know we're not releasing this on our usual release day, but we wanted to get it out as quickly as possible, and we will get back to our regular programming, because we won't give it away, but we're going to have a lot of fun in the month of August. Just trust us.
We're calling it Fun August.
August.
Fun in
That's
August.
not alliterative. We have an alliteration for this, guys.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah. Should we say it? We'll tease them. And if something changed, we'll let you know. But Alcatraz August or August in Alcatraz.
Mm-hmm.
So
you pick.
Whatever you want.
Decide. You decide.
But so stay tuned for that, and also R.I.P. to Tony Sirico, and then just breaking as we record this, L.Q. Jones, who is an older Western actor, appeared in The Wild Bunch and some Peckinpah films, and all throughout the 70s, and he was in Casino. Also has passed away. So rest in peace to all those that we have lost. It feels like there's a ton. So we may have some more, sadly, more emergency programming to adjust, but hopefully not anytime soon. So anything else, guys, on James Caan or Rollerball?
No.
We said it all.
If you want to check us out on our social media, we're ReconCinemation Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, and you can find our archives at ReconCinemation.com. Don't forget to rate and review, and give us some 5-star reviews on whatever it's called now, Apple Podcasts, I think. So check us out there. And a quick thank you to our friends, E.K. Wimmer for the theme music and Curtis Moore for the poster. Don't forget to check out EK's podcast, Laser Graves. Also, I'm going to just plug a random podcast that I'm into, late to the party, just kind of catching up on it. But in these sort of sometimes what feel like dark times, I've been listening to How Did This Get Made with Paul Scheer and June Diane Raphael and Jason Mantzakis, and it's absolutely hilarious. There's just great when times feel tough, you can listen to that show separately from ours, and it's just such a great time. But that's what I'm listening to.
Very good. It's a good one. That's a great one.
Yeah, it is. Lots of fun ones there. But
I thought when you said I'm catching up, I thought you were going to throw out cereal or something like that. I was like,
no.
Yeah, you're way behind.
How Did This Get Made? It feels like there's thousands of episodes already.
There are. They have so many episodes.
But they're so good. And we were just listening to Superman 3 and Moonfall, and like just so many good ones. Spider-Man 3, like just classics. But anyway, stay tuned. We're gonna have fun episodes coming up, and we will catch you guys next time on ReconCinemation.
Take care.
Bye now.
James Caan forever.
James Caan.
Oh, James
Dude,
Caan.
what the hell happened to John McTiernan? I know this is totally not on James Caan, but we're done.